I never thought I'd have to worry about being poisoned at a family dinner, but that's exactly what happened last month at my in-laws' house. My name is Ethan Parker, a 34-year-old videographer based in Portland, Oregon. I've built my business from scratch over the last decade. Wedding films, corporate videos, documentary work, the kind of career that thrives if you're talented and dedicated. And I am both. But to my in-laws, especially Penelope, what I do has never been considered legitimate work. "How's the little video hobby going?" Victor would ask at family gatherings, not even attempting to hide his condescension. He was a corporate attorney, the kind of man who measured success by billable hours and country club memberships. Every monthly dinner at their Tudor-style home in West Hills was the same. Penelope fussing over her daughter while Victor interrogated me about my finances and retirement plans. My wife Scarlett would squeeze my hand under the table, a silent apology for her parents' behavior. I'd been filming a documentary series in Alaska all week, trudging through freezing temperatures to capture footage of climate change impacts for PBS. I was exhausted, but Scarlett insisted we couldn't miss her mother's 60th birthday celebration. "Just a few hours," she promised. "We'll be home by 9. I should have listened to that knot in my stomach when Penelope cornered me in the kitchen that evening. The way her eyes darted around before she handed me that drink. The slight tremor in her perfectly manicured hands as she said, "I made it special just for you. A special cocktail for my favorite son-in-law." Something wasn't right. I just didn't know how wrong it was about to get. Scarlett and I met 7 years ago when she hired me to create promotional videos for the environmental nonprofit where she worked as a director. She was finishing her PhD in environmental science, and I was establishing my reputation in documentary filmmaking. We connected instantly. She understood my passion for storytelling through visuals, and I admired her dedication to environmental protection. Her parents were another story. From our first meeting, Victor made it clear he had expected someone different for his daughter. Someone with a law degree, a corner office, and a family name that appeared in the social register. Someone exactly like him. Penelope was more subtle. She'd praise my work while asking when I planned to settle into something stable. She'd invite me to family functions, then introduce me as the videographer instead of her son-in-law. For years, I tried to win them over, bringing expensive wine to dinner, showing them my award-winning documentaries, mentioning high-profile clients. Nothing changed their perception that I was just passing through their daughter's life, a phase she'd outgrow. Last Thanksgiving, I overheard Penelope on the phone. "Scarlett could have married James, you know? Neurosurgeon, family connections. But she chose the creative one." The way she paused before creative made it sound like a communicable disease. Victor was more direct. When Scarlett and I announced we were trying for a baby, he pulled me aside. "Children are expensive, son. Maybe think about real employment before bringing one into the world." I never told Scarlett these things. She loved her parents despite their flaws, and I didn't want to force her to choose sides. So I smiled, shook Victor's hand firmly at every visit, complimented Penelope's cooking, and kept my thoughts to myself. But there were signs I should have taken more seriously. The way Penelope would ask Scarlett to help in the kitchen whenever I talked about a successful project. How she'd accidentally exclude me from family photos. The time Victor suggested therapy for Scarlett's impulsive decisions while looking directly at me. I ignored it all, thinking time would eventually bring acceptance. I was wrong. The Saturday of Penelope's birthday dinner, I returned from Alaska with wind-chapped cheeks and memory cards full of footage that would secure my contract for another season. I was bone-tired but showered, put on a button-down shirt, and drove us to her parents' sprawling home overlooking the city. Dinner started normally. Victor bragged about a recent high-profile case. Penelope fussed over the table settings. Scarlett's brother Owen and his wife Riley made polite conversation. I nursed a beer and counted the minutes until we could leave. After the main course, Penelope announced she'd made her famous pomegranate martinis for dessert. She disappeared into the kitchen, and I offered to help carry glasses. That's when I saw it. She had 2 glasses separate from the others. As I entered, she quickly added something from a small vial into one of them. It wasn't a garnish or flavor. It was colorless, odorless, and she tucked the vial away the moment she heard my footsteps. "Oh, Ethan, "I've got this," she said too brightly. "This one's for you. Special recipe for my favorite son-in-law." My throat tightened. The glass had a barely perceptible film floating on top, catching the light. "Let me help you carry these," I said, taking both glasses she'd prepared. In the dining room, Victor was checking his phone, barely looking up when I approached. "Martini, sir?" I placed the tampered glass in front of him instead of taking it myself. I watched him drink, making an excuse about preferring water with my dessert. An hour later, Victor was pale, sweating, and rushing to the bathroom. The violent sounds of his illness echoed through the house. Penelope's face drained of color when she realized what had happened. Her eyes met mine across the table, and in that moment, I knew two things with absolute certainty. My mother-in-law had tried to drug me, and she knew that I knew. I didn't react, didn't confront her, just ate my chocolate cake while Scarlett rushed to check on her father. In the chaos that followed, Victor insisted it must have been food poisoning. Penelope stammered about bad shellfish in the appetizers. I quietly pocketed the untouched glass meant for me while Scarlett helped her father to the guest bedroom to lie down. Something had shifted inside me. The anger I felt wasn't hot or explosive. It was cold, deliberate. I wasn't just going to let this go, but I wasn't going to fight their way either. I was going to make them face exactly who they were. The Monday after the dinner, I took the glass to Nathan, a former client who ran a toxicology lab at the University Medical Center. "Personal or professional?" he asked when I explained what I needed. "Family matter," I replied. 3 days later, he called. "Ethan, there were benzodiazepines in that drink, nothing lethal, but enough to knock someone out for hours, maybe cause some memory loss. Where did you get this?" I thanked him and asked for a written report. I didn't answer his question. That night, I told Scarlett I wanted to skip the next family dinner. Said I needed to focus on editing the Alaska footage. She was disappointed but understood. I didn't tell her about the test results. Not yet. I needed more information first. Over the next 2 weeks, I did some digging. Penelope had prescriptions for Xanax from 3 different doctors. She'd been doubling and tripling her doses for years. There were also rumors about her in their social circle. Strange behavior at a charity gala, accusations of stealing jewelry at her country club, stories her family had worked hard to bury. I compiled everything and waited for my moment. It came when Scarlett mentioned her mother needed videos for a fundraising event she was chairing. "She specifically asked if you would film it," Scarlett said, surprised by the request. I agreed. The following Saturday, I arrived at their house alone, camera bag in one hand, a sealed envelope in the other. Penelope was waiting, dressed expensively, makeup perfect. "Victor was at the office," she explained. "Before we start," I said quietly, "I thought you might want to see this." I handed her the envelope containing the toxicology report along with printouts of her multiple prescriptions. Her hands trembled as she read. "This is absurd," she whispered. "I would never. We both know what happened." I cut her off. "What I don't know is why." Her face hardened. "You're not good enough for my daughter. You never will be. A man should provide security, not videos. And drugging your daughter's husband provides security?" I kept my voice level. "It wasn't going to hurt you," she snapped. "Just make you sick. Make you miss that ridiculous film festival you've been talking about for months. Show Scarlett that you're unreliable." I let that sink in. "Here's what happens next," I said finally. "You're going to tell Victor what you did. Then you're both going to start treating me with respect. Not because you've suddenly changed your minds about me, but because the alternative is Scarlett finding out exactly who her parents are." Penelope laughed, but it sounded hollow. "She'd never believe you over us." I picked up my camera bag. "Maybe not, but she'll believe the lab report and the prescription records and the neighbors you've alienated. Are you willing to bet your relationship with your daughter on that?" I left without filming a single second of footage. That night, Penelope called Scarlett in tears, claiming I'd behaved inappropriately during our session. Said I'd been hostile and threatening. When Scarlett confronted me, I couldn't hide the truth anymore. I showed her everything. The lab report, the prescriptions, even text messages from her mother that had become increasingly hostile over the years. My mother wouldn't do this, she kept saying, but her voice lacked conviction. The next day, she confronted her parents. I wasn't there, but when she returned home, her eyes were red from crying. My father says it's all a misunderstanding, she said quietly. That you're trying to drive a wedge between us because you're insecure about your career. I just nodded. I'd expected this. What do you think? I asked. She didn't answer, just crawled into bed and turned away from me. I'd pushed back, but somehow I'd fallen deeper into their trap. Now I was the villain in their story, and they'd managed to plant doubt in the one person whose opinion mattered most to me. For 2 weeks, Scarlett barely spoke to me. She went to her parents' house alone, came back with red eyes and new doubts. I threw myself into work, spending long hours in my studio, waiting for the storm to pass. Then a package arrived for me. No return address, just my name scrawled across the top in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a USB drive and a note. You should see this. Riley, Owen's wife. The USB drive contained security footage from Penelope and Victor's home. They'd installed cameras after a break-in last year. Something Penelope had conveniently forgotten. The timestamp showed Penelope's birthday dinner. There she was, clear as day, taking something from her purse, looking around nervously, then emptying a vial into my drink. The footage was unmistakable. I sat staring at my computer screen, a strange mix of vindication and sadness washing over me. When Scarlett came home that evening, I simply turned the monitor toward her and pressed play. She watched without speaking, her face draining of color. When the video ended, she rewound it and watched again. Then a third time. I need to call Riley, she finally said, voice barely above a whisper. The call lasted over an hour. I gave her privacy, but I could hear her voice rising and falling through the closed door of our bedroom. When she emerged, her eyes were red but clear. Riley's been trying to tell me for years, she said, sinking onto the couch beside me. My parents, they've done this before. The story came out in pieces. Thomas, Scarlett's fiancé before me, had been systematically driven away by her parents. They'd spread rumors about him at their country club, called his boss with vague concerns about his stability, even hired someone to follow him. When none of that worked, Penelope had started slipping something into his coffee when he visited. Just enough to make him jittery, paranoid, unpredictable. I thought he was having a breakdown, Scarlett whispered. He tried to tell me your parents are poisoning me, but I didn't believe him. I thought he needed help. They'd done the same to Riley's sister when she briefly dated Owen in college. The pattern was clear. Anyone who threatened their control over their children became a target. Why didn't Riley tell me sooner? Scarlett asked, more to herself than to me. Would you have believed her? I asked gently. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. The next morning, Owen called. He'd seen the footage too. Riley had shown him before sending it to me. He'd confronted his parents, and the house had erupted into chaos. Victor had threatened to cut Owen out of his will. Penelope had collapsed in tears, claiming everyone was turning against her. They're in full damage control mode, Owen said. Dad's already called his lawyer to see if the footage was obtained legally. Mom's telling everyone you doctored the video. Scarlett took the phone. We need to talk, all of us. Not at their house. Neutral ground. They settled on meeting at a private room in a downtown restaurant the following evening. Scarlett barely slept that night, alternating between anger and grief. I held her while she cried, not saying much. This wasn't about me anymore. The restaurant was Scarlett's choice. An upscale place where her parents couldn't make a scene without damaging their precious reputation. Owen and Riley arrived first, then us, and finally Victor and Penelope, both looking like they were attending a funeral. Before anyone speaks, Scarlett said once we were seated, I want to make something clear. This isn't a discussion about whether Mom drugged Ethan's drink. We have proof that happened. This is about why and what happens next. Victor cleared his throat. Your mother made a terrible mistake. She's been under tremendous pressure with her charity work and her medication. Stop, Owen cut in. Just stop. This isn't about medication or pressure. This is about control. Penelope dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. I only wanted what was best for you both. These people, she gestured vaguely at Riley and me, they don't understand our family, our position in the community. Our position? Scarlett's voice was ice. Is that what this is about? How it looks to have a daughter married to a filmmaker instead of a lawyer. How embarrassing to have a son who married a kindergarten teacher instead of a debutante. Riley reached for Owen's hand across the table. I could see the years of hurt in her eyes. You drove Thomas away, Scarlett continued, her voice breaking. I loved him, and you made me think he was unstable. Do you have any idea what that did to me? To him? He wasn't right for you, Victor said firmly. Neither is Ethan. You could have had anyone, Harvard graduates, doctors, men with family connections. I didn't want anyone. I wanted Thomas. And now I want Ethan. My choice, not yours. The conversation spiraled from there. Years of resentment poured out. Owen's decision to become a teacher instead of joining Victor's firm. Scarlett's choice to work for a nonprofit instead of going into politics as her parents had planned. Every life decision questioned, undermined, manipulated. You don't get to control our lives anymore, Owen finally said. Either you accept our choices, our spouses, our careers, everything, or you don't see us. Those are the only options now. Penelope began to sob in earnest. Victor's face hardened. You're being ridiculous, he said. Everything we've done has been for your benefit. One day you'll understand that. No, Scarlett said quietly. We won't, because it's not true. We left the restaurant with nothing resolved except the knowledge that things would never be the same. In the car, Scarlett stared out the window, silent tears running down her face. I'm sorry, I said, not knowing what else to say. She turned to me, her expression fierce despite her tears. Don't be. They're the ones who should be sorry. And one day they will be. Over the next few months, the family fractured. Scarlett and Owen agreed to limited contact with their parents. Holidays only, always in public places, never alone. Victor and Penelope made half-hearted attempts at reconciliation, sending expensive gifts that went returned, leaving voicemails that went unanswered. Riley and I found ourselves in an unexpected alliance, comparing notes on the subtle ways Victor and Penelope had tried to undermine us over the years. The stories were both infuriating and darkly comical. The time Penelope had accidentally sent Riley's professional emails to spam, the way Victor had called my clients to check my references. They never thought we were good enough, Riley said during one of our now regular family dinners. Just the four of us. But they never considered that we thought the same about them. 6 months passed. Scarlett and I found out we were expecting our first child. A girl, according to the ultrasound. We painted the spare bedroom pale green, assembled furniture, and tried to focus on the future instead of the family rift that still felt like an open wound. Do you think we should tell them? Scarlett asked one evening, her hand resting on her growing belly. I knew who them was without asking. That's entirely up to you. She nodded, thoughtful. They're still her grandparents, regardless of everything else. The next day, she called her mother. I only heard Scarlett's side of the conversation. Cautious, measured, setting clear boundaries. When she hung up, her expression was complicated. They want to have us over for dinner, to celebrate. And you said. I said we'd meet them at a restaurant instead, and that Owen and Riley should be invited too. I nodded, relieved she wasn't rushing back into their orbit without precautions. The dinner was set for the following weekend at an upscale restaurant downtown, neutral territory. Scarlett was visibly nervous as we drove there, fidgeting with her necklace, a habit from childhood. We can leave any time, I reminded her. One word from you and we're gone. Victor and Penelope were already seated when we arrived, both impeccably dressed as always. Penelope's face lit up when she saw Scarlett's baby bump, but she hesitated before approaching, unsure of her welcome. You look beautiful, she said finally, keeping a careful distance. Owen and Riley arrived moments later, creating a welcome buffer. We ordered drinks. sparkling water for Scarlett, and navigated through awkward small talk about the weather and the restaurant's decor. Finally, Victor cleared his throat. We've been doing a lot of thinking these past months. And some counseling. This was news. Victor had always dismissed therapy as nonsense for people too weak to handle their own problems. We've come to realize that our behavior was problematic, Penelope added, the words sounding rehearsed. Problematic, Owen repeated, eyebrows raised. That's an interesting choice of words for drugging someone's drink. Penelope flinched. I know what I did was unforgivable. I've been working with Dr. Levinson to understand why I felt so threatened, why I couldn't just accept your choices. And, Scarlett prompted when her mother fell silent. And I was wrong, Penelope said, her voice small. I was terrified of losing control, of you both moving beyond my reach. It wasn't about Ethan or Riley, not really. It was about my own fears. Victor looked uncomfortable but nodded. We both had very specific visions for your lives. When you chose differently, we reacted poorly. Poorly. I couldn't help myself. You systematically tried to destroy our relationships. Yes, Victor admitted, surprising me. We did. And we were wrong. The conversation continued through appetizers and main courses. Halting, difficult, but more honest than any we'd had before. Victor and Penelope had indeed been seeing a therapist, at the insistence of Victor's sister, who'd threatened to cut ties with them as well if they didn't address their behavior. We don't expect forgiveness, Penelope said as dessert arrived. But we're hoping for a chance to be part of your lives, and our grandchild's life, on whatever terms you set. Scarlett looked at Owen, a silent conversation passing between siblings. We need time, Owen finally said. This isn't something we can resolve over one dinner. And there need to be boundaries, Scarlett added. Clear ones, with consequences if they're crossed. Victor nodded stiffly. We understand. As we prepared to leave, Penelope reached into her purse and pulled out a small package wrapped in silver paper. This is for the baby, she said, handing it to Scarlett. No pressure to open it now. In the car, Scarlett carefully unwrapped the gift. A vintage silver rattle that had belonged to her grandmother. I always loved this, she whispered, turning it over in her hands. I thought Mom had sold it years ago during one of her redecorating phases. Is it a peace offering or a manipulation? I asked. With my mother? Probably both. She sighed. But it's a start. Over the next few months, we established a new normal. Sunday phone calls with strict time limits. Monthly dinners at restaurants, never at their house. Victor and Penelope were invited to the baby shower but asked not to bring extravagant gifts that might overshadow other guests. They complied with every boundary, though not always gracefully. Victor still occasionally made comments about my unusual career, but they were less pointed, more curious than condemning. Penelope still fussed over Scarlett's appearance but caught herself more often, redirecting her attention to the baby preparations instead. The most surprising change came when my documentary about Alaskan climate change was accepted at a major film festival. I mentioned it casually during one of our dinners, not expecting much reaction. When is it? Victor asked. The screening. Next month in Seattle. He nodded, making a note in his phone. We'd like to attend, if that's acceptable to you. I nearly choked on my water. You want to come to my film screening? Is that so surprising? He asked, though his tight smile suggested he knew exactly why I was shocked. Yes, I said honestly. It is. Well, we'd like to see your work, unless you'd prefer we didn't come. I glanced at Scarlett, who looked as surprised as I felt. No, you're welcome to come. I just didn't expect your interest. The night of the screening, I was a bundle of nerves. Not about the film, which had already received positive reviews, but about Victor and Penelope sitting in the audience, judging not just my work but my entire career choice. They arrived early, dressed formally as if attending the opera. Penelope had even brought flowers, a gesture so out of character I momentarily wondered if they were for someone else. These are for you, she said, handing me the bouquet. Break a leg. Isn't that what they say? The film received a standing ovation. As the lights came up, I searched the crowd for Scarlett and found her wiping tears, smiling proudly. Next to her, Victor was standing, clapping with the rest of the audience. Our eyes met across the room, and he gave me a small nod, the closest thing to approval I'd ever received from him. At the reception afterward, a producer from National Geographic approached me about a potential project. Victor, standing nearby, inserted himself into the conversation. "You should talk to my son-in-law about his work in the Arctic," he said, his hand on my shoulder. His understanding of visual storytelling is quite remarkable. Later, as we walked back to our hotel, Scarlett squeezed my hand. "Did that really just happen? Did my father just brag about you to a National Geographic producer?" "I think he did," I said, still processing the surreal evening. "Though he called it visual storytelling instead of making videos. So maybe he's still working on it." She laughed, then grew serious. "Do you think they're really changing, or just performing?" I considered this. Maybe a bit of both. But they're trying, which is more than I expected. 2 weeks later, Scarlett went into labor 3 weeks early. In the rush to the hospital, I called both our families. My parents were in Florida and couldn't get a flight until morning, but Victor and Penelope arrived within an hour, laden with flowers, balloons, and a stuffed bear larger than the hospital bassinet. "We can wait outside," Penelope said, uncharacteristically hesitant. "We don't want to intrude." Scarlett, between contractions, reached for her mother's hand. "Stay, please." 14 hours later, our daughter was born, 6 pounds, 3 ounces, with a shock of dark hair and her mother's determined chin. As I held her, marveling at her tiny perfection, I looked up to see Victor watching us, his expression softer than I'd ever seen it. "Would you like to hold your granddaughter?" I asked, surprising myself with the offer. He nodded, carefully taking her from me with more practice than I would have expected. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "Welcome to the family." It wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. There were still tense moments, still times when old patterns threatened to reemerge. But watching Victor cradle my daughter with genuine tenderness, I realized something important. Families aren't fixed entities. They're constantly evolving, constantly changing shape. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they can heal.